Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the first round of the Goatlander Tournament. If you're wondering what this is and why I'm doing it, go back and look at the Goatlander intro video that I put up, and all will be revealed. The goats are hungry, so let's not dally, and get the first match underway.
William the Gruff versus Lurkhorn.
The stage is set. The first round of the tournament will have standard deployment, no secondary objectives, and thematically placed terrain. This is a river, this is impassable terrain, these trees are small forests, impassable terrain, ruin, and I guess we'll call that a wall. Lurkhorn chose deployment and chose this side. A bit of a bodged job on deployment means that William's hounds are far out over here, but hopefully they've still got the speed to get to where they need to be. Lurkhorn is a Soothsayer level 1 of Shadow, with the Potion of Swiftness and the Soothsayer Staff. And he's lurking here behind his 5 mongrel raiders. Between the river forks are 15 Wildhorns with additional hand weapons, champion and standard bearer. On the right hand board edge we have William the Gruff, a beast chieftain with heavy armour and additional hand weapons. He's travelling light but aggressive. In the top corner, as mentioned, we've got 6 feral hounds, and then with William backing him up are 13 Wildhorn with champion, musician, standard bearer and additional hand weapons. Lurkhorn wins the first turn, and his herd moves up to get the alpha strike. We go into the magic phase, and there's a rather average flux of magic. Lurkhorn has discovered that he knows how to make people glimpse the end, which is the shadow spell that decreases enemy toughness, and it could really swing the game if he gets it off. He tries the boosted version, which needs a 15+. He throws a cautious 4 dice, or maybe that's not really that cautious, but oh well. However, the innate magic resistance of William's herd manages to dispel the spell. Nevertheless, one of the mongrels pulls out a miraculous shot and fells a Wildhorn, at long range and on the run no less. So William's herd surges forward, anxious to close the gap between them and the dangerous wizard, the hounds lagging a bit from being out of position. Back to Lurkhorn, the Soothsayer moves up into the river, using the raiders to cover him. They don't move as they're training their eyes on the oncoming horde. It's a huge 10 dice to 6 magic phase for Lurkhorn. Everyone throws caution to the wind and throws 6 dice. Lurkhorn gets overwhelming force and lowers William's herd's toughness by 3, and that's not looking healthy for them. The miscast strips Lurkhorn of his wizardly powers, but he does manage to use the Shadow Step attribute to move over here behind his fellow goats. And these attributes are like a free spell if you successfully cast one of your other spells. In the shooting phase, the mongrels make the most of their toughness 1 foe and bring down another 3 Wildhorns, but their nerve holds. We go into William's turn. I declare an ambitious charge on the Ungor with the hounds, and the little archers declare a stand and shoot. Not sure why I didn't declare a charge with the Wildhorn unit. I think I was worried about being hit in the flank by the Lurkhorn's herd that was hiding just over here on the other side of the river. But I'd almost certainly be able to kill these raiders and then reform. So that was a bad idea. It was a pretty huge charge for the hounds, but they made it with an 11 thanks to their swift stride, so they moved up and performed their wheel to make it into the mongrel's flank. In the magic phase, I managed to dispel the remains in play Glimpse the End spell, and that was really needed. Perhaps that's why they didn't charge the mongrels. Would have been just too embarrassing to lose from being toughness 1. In combat, there are casualties on both sides, but the dogs win and their Ungor break. The hounds don't pursue because I don't want to accidentally charge the Wildhorns, and I like where the raiders are jamming up their charge lane. So going into Lurkhorn's turn 3, the mongrels fail to rally, but stay on the board by the tips of their hoof toes, and the rest of the goats are like, we're not getting that river. So in William the Gruff's turn 3, the hounds move into the river to redirect, and William and his boys move up to countercharge. It is possible that Lurkhorn's unit could make this charge, but then they'd only be fighting with 2 or 3 at most. Wouldn't be getting their ranks for the river, and I think William has the advantage as a combat character. Turn 4 Lurkhorn, the mongrels rally, and then Lurkhorn's unit decides to take William's bait and call his bluff by charging the hounds. Hopefully we'll win, reform, and then count on our numerical advantage to win the day. And it's all going to plan so far. We smash the dogs and take no casualties in return, and turn to face the enemy Wildhorns. Turn 4 William, the charge comes, and the water turns red with goats. William's outnumbered beast herd pass their primal fury, or whatever it's called, and Lurkhorns fail. The beast chieftain easily cuts down Lurkhorn's champion in single combat, but even despite rerolls, his own goats fail to kill, well, they kill 2 of the opposing goats, which was just awful. whilst Lurkhorn's goats hack down a whole rank in return. They're wounding each other on 5. Seriously, it was unbelievable. William still wins this thanks to his musician, but the goats hold. Lurkhorn turn 5. The mongrels charge in the flank. William challenges Lurkhorn, but the cur refuses. The damage is more even on each side this time, but William is losing the war of attrition, and in the end he's left fighting back to back with his champion. He really should have gone for the mongrels rather than focusing on the wild horns. Whoops. So in William turn 5, Lurkhorn finally accepts the challenge, wielding his soothsayer staff in a defensive stance. He quaffs his potion of speed. He wounds William with a tricksy jab, but the warrior goat hacks him down in return. In the swirling combat around them, William's champion falls, leaving him alone to face the manic horde. Lurkhorn's goats win the combat thanks to their banner, but William is going nowhere. We go into Lurkhorn turn 6, final turn. The wild horns just can't get through William's toughness 5, and he slays another 2 of them, forgetting completely about the mongrels because, they're quite small and easy to forget. We go into William's turn 6. Hacking around wildly, the chieftain is impervious to harm, and despite remembering this time to attack the mongrels, they're quite tricky to hit, and he brings the 2 units to a stalemate. The game ends there as the tournament is capped at 6 turns, and despite William the Gruff's valiant efforts, the day goes to Lurkhorn, as the wild horns and the mongrels have preserved their points. An underhanded way to win, perhaps, but what can you expect from someone who refuses a challenge? Boo, hiss. I did play one more unofficial turn, just to see how it would end, and I leave you with news that, after one more round, this magnificent bastard killed all the mongrels, and then ran down the wild horns when they fled. Shame such heroism came too late, but what can I say, the goats take tournament bureaucracy very seriously, but I'm sure we haven't seen the last of this guy. William the Gruff, remember the name.
Heartache versus Mr. Tumnus.
Okay, game 2 of round 1. Mr. Tumnus, the Beast Chieftain, has the unenviable task of taking on Heartache, the Minotaur Chieftain. River, ruin, impassable terrain, small forests, impassable terrain, and I guess impassable. Mr. Tumnus is with the unit, and he's got the Screaming Swords and heavy armour. With him there are 11 Wildhorn with a champion and standard bearer, and shields. Holding the left is a mongrel herd, and they've got spears and shields. And those shields are looking rather small comfort against the size of those Minotaur's axes, and now that the parry rule has changed. Heartache and his Minotaurs all have a hand weapon and light armour. Heartache seizes the initiative, and the balls come thundering forwards without much care. The mood among Mr. Tumnus's horde is not optimistic, I'll be honest, but the Beast Chieftain sees one slim hope for victory. The herd long bomb charges a surprised Heartache. They technically count as still within the forest, so they've got their strider keeping them steadfast. The hope is to squeak through with combat res and use the -1 leadership ability of Fear to break and run the beast down, and I'm really regretting not having a musician. Heartache challenges and Mr. Tumnus accepts, figuring he's got the best chance of stopping us hemorrhaging combat res. But bravery is poor armour against a Minotaur, and Tumnus is quickly outmatched. He gave it his best shot, but the Wildhorns with their charge, rank and banner win combat by 1, and Tumnus's brave sacrifice and desperate gamble almost pay off. As to everyone's surprise, Heartache hightails it, but the Wildhorns can't quite keep pace. Heartache turn 2, suitably embarrassed, the Minotaur Chieftain rallies to face his pursuers, and the Minotaurs stampede the luckless mongrels. The Minotaurs fail their primal urge, but the mongrels grip deep, and are really disappointed to find they don't get primal frenzy anymore. The Minotaurs take a flesh wound and pulverise the mongrels. Tumnus turn 2, the Wildhorns charge home, because what else are they going to do? Heartache challenges, but the champion isn't quite made of the same stuff as Mr. Tumnus, and refuses. However, without frenzy anymore, Heartache only manages to chop down 2 of the Wildhorns, stalling combat. Heartache turn 3. Yep, the Wildhorns get butchered and run down. They didn't even really bother trying to run, as Heartache caught them with a roll of 3. But, they did manage to take a wound off him, so, that's something. But yeah, Mr. Tumnus tabled by Heartache at the bottom of turn 3. And after this showing, despite a bit of a wobble there, Heartache, the Minotaurs look like they could be the ones to beat in this tournament.
Paddy McKinsey versus Hulkan.
Okay, there have been some list changes from those advertised on the intro video. Basically, the Skull Splitter bow on the Centaur Chieftain was a bit overpowerful, so I swapped things up a bit, And now the Centaur list is legal for 250 points. We've got Polkan, this Centaur chieftain with a hardened shield, heavy armour, throwing weapons, and an additional hand weapon. The 5 Centaurs have full command, throwing weapons, and lances. Paddy McGinty, the Beast Chieftain, now has the Skull Splitter Bow, and no other upgrades. 1 unit of 5 Mongol Raiders, and 10 Wild Horns with a Standard Bearer and Musician, and they've brought their own throwing weapons. So here we are, Game 3 of Tournament Round 1. River, forest, impassable terrain, and a hill, with 2 levels. Paddy chose this side of the board. He put his down his unit here, followed by my Centaurs, followed by my Raiders, followed by Polkan, and then Paddy deployed himself in the river to get the Alpha Strike. And the Centaurs are playing this stone cold sober, which probably helped them get the initiative. They don't vanguard, they just move up, and then they throw all their axes at Paddy. Or I guess maybe they have javelins. Anyway, one of Polkan's strikes home and puts a wound on the Beast Chieftain. Paddy turn 1. The Goat Chieftain runs away out of the river, although it prevents him from marching, so he can't get any further. The Wild Horns move up to the hill, to a position where they can't be seen by the Centaurs, but they can draw a line of sight to Polkan. And the idea is we can shoot anything on the hill, and potentially even charge at Polkan if he doesn't move out of the way, which could lead us into the Centaurs instead, which would also be preferable, I think. Anything to stop them from charging with those lances. The mongrels move up around the hill and take some pot shots at Polkan, who just laughs them off. But Paddy does manage to take down a Centaur with his Skull Splitter Bow. Polkan turn 2, the Centaurs use their speed to their advantage. Polkan braves the river and completes a charge against Paddy, who stands and shoots and doesn't do anything. I love Toughness 5. The Centaurs use their free reform abilities to move up to the flank of the Goat unit and pepper them with short-range throwing weapons. And throwing weapons are now really worth considering. Range 12, multiple shots, and quick to fire. They're probably still not optimal for a Beastman list, but those changes in the drop in cost don't make them an instant no anymore. And I quite like the idea of having ranged Beastmen. 10 shots bring down 2 Wild Horns, and I don't think that's too bad considering they're hitting on 6s and I think wounding on 4s. Over in combat, the 2 heroes go at each other. Paddy puts a wound through on Polkan, but his own wound is telling, and Polkan finishes him off with a mighty blow. These Centaur chieftains aren't half bad. Paddy's herd turn 2, the Wild Horns reform swiftly thanks to their musician and pelt the Centaurs, killing 1. Bit of a bad show perhaps, but Strength 3 does struggle against Toughness 4. The mongrels shoot everything into Polkan to no avail. Polkan turn 3, the Centaur chieftain skirts around. In the shooting phase, the Centaurs kill 3 of the Wild Horns by themselves because they decided not to charge and take all that stand and shoot. It's too much for the Wild Horns and they flee, bouncing off the board. And Polkan picks off a mongrel for good measure. Paddy turn 3, the mongrels try to put everything into Polkan and again fail. They are frickin' useless. Polkan turn 4, everyone charges, and although the mongrels bring down a Centaur with their stand and shoot, it is very much game over. And the Centaurs are through with a convincing victory.
The Great Hargeisa versus Baphomet.
The 4th and final game of Tournament Round 1. Baphomet, the level 2 soothsayer of the Wild, or whatever it is, who has also got a Talisman of Shielding, leads his 10-strong Wild Horn herd with additional hand weapons and a champion, and his raiding chariots holding the flank. Facing off against them are the herd of the Great Hargeisa, a beast chieftain with the lucky charm, heavy armour, the beast axe and a shield. He's leading 13 Wild Horns with additional hand weapons, champion and standard bearer, and has 5 feral hounds on the flank to try to chaff up that chariot. Baphomet has the spells Swarm of Insect and The Beast Within. Here we go. Hargeisa gets the first turn and moves up. They're outranged and they've got to get to grips with that shaman soon. In Baphomet turn 1, everything just shuffles around just a little bit. There's no rush. In the magic phase, he tries to cast The Beast Within on his own unit, but it gets dispelled. And then a 2-dice Swarm of Insects does incredibly good damage, dragging down the whole of the back rank of Hargeisa's unit. Not a good start for the chieftain. Hargeisa turn 2, it was a long charge, but I felt we had to go for it. Unfortunately, the Wild Horns fell short of their goal, but at least they're still fairly protected from the chariot. The dogs have moved up to try to cover. I didn't put them in the way. I'm not sure why. I think I was thinking to lure the chariot off and having them in a flanking position if it wasn't charged was, yeah, if I'd have put them here, I'd have just charged with these things, killed them and reformed, and I just thought it would be a waste. Maybe it would have been better, as it could have blocked up the chariot, but yeah, that's what I decided to do. Baphomet turn 2, the chariot does charge the dogs and goes ballistic with about 18 inches of charge, catching and running down the hounds. The magic phase is quite weak, but I managed to get off the swarm of insects again, killing 2 gore, and now things are looking pretty dire for Hargeisa. Oh, and you can see that I shuffled them back a little bit and popped the wizard out. Hargeisa's turn, the charge isn't particularly long, it's like an 8 or a 9. They go for it, but they fail. Baphomet turn 3, the wild horns charge, the chariot turns around to get into position, and despite there being a chieftain to deal with, I'm feeling quite confident. So I've arranged it so that it can charge next turn without blocking my pursuit move if we do break them in combat. Baphomet decides the time is now, puts 6 power dice into, the Beast Within, getting it with irresistible force, and he takes a wound for his trouble. But I think that was worth it. In combat, Hargeisa kills the champion in a challenge, but only just thanks to him being at toughness 5. And in the end, Baphomet's forces win combat by 1, but the beleaguered goats hold. We go into Hargeisa's turn 4, and the combat is fierce. Despite their stat advantage, Baphomet's goats fall like wheat before a scythe, as the Great Hargeisa refuses to give in. However, with Baphomet's sinister eye on them, his wild horns hold. I am just damn good at making these leadership checks. Seriously, my average on 2 dice must be like 5. Baphomet turn 4, the chariot comes piling in and things are not looking good for the Great Hargeisa. In the magic phase, a perfectly 4-diced Beast Within puts the wild horns back up to strength. And Hargeisa did try to dispel this in the last turn, but the dice were just too weak. Real bad luck there. In combat, yeah. Impact hits mulch the unit and wound Hargeisa, who, staggered by the blow, can't do anything in return, and the mighty warrior is finally dragged down. Tough match for Hargeisa there, he was really up against it, but victory goes to Baphomet, and it looks like he could be quite a strong contender as well. So there you have it, Baphomet, Polkan, Heartache and Lurkhorn all go through to this second round. Who will prevail? Find out in the next exciting instalment of the Goatlander Tournament.